So a guy, he finally hits the number. He opens up his Fidelity app, that financial app, and he stares at that big screen and the balance just staring right back at him. And instead of feeling free, he just kind of drops his shoulders. He closes the app. He sits there on the couch because right under the win, he spots the first few traps. Now, half of his money right now, it's riding on one stock. The new car payment that swallowed part of the raise and the tax bill already is waiting in the inbox like it got there before he did. And that's kind of the sickening realization hitting right after the app closes. Because in theory, you did exactly what the wealth machine told you to do. I mean, you worked harder, earned more, invested, upgraded, and somehow the reward does not feel like freedom. It just feels like a nicer version of the same type of pressure. So why is this all so frustrating? Because the brochure version of success, it looks perfect, right? I mean, you work hard, you earn more, you invest smarter, you upgrade everything. It's all very clean, very linked in. But then real life, it shows up with a fine print and a bat, which brings us to this first trap that comes inside these financial apps, which is overconcentration. Now, this guy, he has $50,000 of his $100,000 portfolio, and it's all sitting in Intel. That stock, it was the darling back in the dot-com days. I think it may have peaked around $65 a share. And even with the recent AI pop, if you bought at the top, you're still waiting to truly break through that old high from the year 2000. Meanwhile, the S&P, it marched up 5 times higher. And that's when the app stops feeling like a scoreboard and it starts feeling like kind of a warning label. Because if half of your portfolio, it depends on one company coming back to glory, you're not just investing anymore. You are emotionally married to a red line on the screen. Now, most financial planners, they'll tell you to keep any single stock under 5 to 10% of your entire portfolio. They want you to diversify. But that guy on the sofa, the guy in that chair, he did what a lot of people do. He fell in love with the story. Now, every refresh on that Fidelity app, it feels like checking on an ex who keeps hurting him. I mean, he starts pulling back, he's holding smaller positions, he's hesitating a heck of a lot more, and he has less of that all-in energy. Because the emotional cost, it isn't worth it anymore. And the second trap, it starts when the raise leaves the app and starts walking into real life. Because this is a lifestyle creep. When the raise hits, the paycheck, it starts looking better. And before the money even has a chance to breathe, the spending starts acting like it got promoted too. So what happens? The car gets upgraded. Your vacations, they get nicer. The restaurant gets easier to justify. And then comes that sentence that sounds responsible right before the credit card starts sweating. And the statement is, we deserve experiences. And that line, it's dangerous because it sounds healthy enough. And sometimes it is, right? But it can also become the permission slip for turning every raise into a more expensive version of the same stress. The couple who used to split appetizers is now dropping 4 figures on a weekend trip because it feels earned. And that would all be fine if the bigger income actually created breathing room. But Goldman Sachs data, it shows the trap on paper. 57% of people making under 50,000 say they live paycheck to paycheck. And that part, it makes sense, right? But the problem is what happens higher up that ladder. Now, 41% of people making over 300,000 say they're still living paycheck to paycheck. And 40% of people making over $500,000 a year, they say the exact same thing. And that is the part that makes people sit back and go, wait, how in the world are you making $500,000 and still feeling trapped? But that is exactly the point. The income changed, but the pressure itself, it didn't leave. It just moved to a nicer neighborhood. And this is where the Millionaire Next Door actually connects. That book studied people who accumulated real wealth. And the pattern, it was not flashy. They didn't upgrade every part of their life the second more money came in. They kept the gap. They kept the cushion. And that gap between what came in and what went out was the whole engine. But for a lot of people, that raise does not create a gap. it ends up creating a new payment. And that's why that same guy who felt rich when the raise hit is now staring at the dinner reservation, the car payment, the vacation tab, the checking account, trying to figure out why the wind still feels so tight. He's not randomly hesitating. He's hesitating because the last few upgrades did not give him the freedom he expected. They just gave him more things to maintain. Which brings us into that third trap. And that third trap, it shows up as taxes. Because he switches to the tax tab in his Schwab app, and suddenly the green number does not look quite as green anymore. The IRS is very efficient. And he has high dividend stocks sitting in a regular taxable account instead of a Roth IRA or a 401k. So what happens? Dividends get taxed every quarter just like rent. And he's not maximizing the HSA. He sells too soon and eats short-term capital gains. And the tax form takes its cut and leaves him staring at the screen thinking, God, you know what? I follow the rules. Where's the breathing room? And now he starts looking at every position differently. Not because he suddenly became a tax genius, but because the app taught him the hard way that returns are not the same. It's not the same thing as keeping the actual money. So what does he do? He holds longer. He moves what he can into the IRA. He starts thinking about the HSA. And the app that used to feel like opportunity now feels like a reminder that someone else always gets first dibs. And once he sees taxes doing that, he starts noticing the same trick in every smart money move. And that's the fourth trap. The fix that comes with another bill. Because he considers refinancing the mortgage. The lender shows this shiny 1% lower rate on that $400,000 loan. The payment ends up dropping from $2,661 to maybe $2,300 or $2,400. That's a nice $263 a month. And for a second, again, it feels like relief. But then the closing disclosure shows up, $8,000 to $12,000 in fees. Now the question is not, can I lower the payment? The question is, how long do I have to stay in this house before this deal actually helps me? I mean, you need 3 years just to break even. So is he sitting there with the refinance paperwork, not because this is some fake family budget scene, but because the paper itself is the insult? I don't know. But the monthly payment says congratulations. The closing costs say not so fast. And he runs the numbers. He asks his wife how long they are really staying. And that is when some people, they just stop.